The night was alive with screams. Not the kind that fade into silence, but the kind that sink into your skin, twisting until you can't tell if it's fear or memory clawing at your chest. The moon hung low and pale above the Colossus market, painting the world in silver and sorrow. Broken stones glistened with blood. The air was thick, iron, smoke, the faint sweetness of burning oil. Somewhere in the distance, a horn cried out, long, low, and final. It was the sound of the hunt beginning. She ran. Bare feet slapping against the cold stone, her breath sharp and uneven, heart pounding like a drum against her ribs. Her name was Lyra, but out here, no one dared speak it. To the Romans, she was only the cursed bride, the one they said carried fire instead of blood. The chain around her ankle dragged as she moved, clinking against the walls like a cruel reminder of what she was running from. Her legs trembled with exhaustion, her lungs burned, and still, she didn't stop. Every heartbeat whispered the same desperate truth: if she stopped, she'd die. The tunnels twisted beneath the market, dark, damp, smelling of mold and iron. The walls seemed to breathe with her, exhaling cold air that made her skin sting. She pressed her hand against the stone to steady herself. Blood smeared beneath her palm. Her blood. Above, the world roared. Men shouting. Coins clattering. Chains being dragged. It was auction night. Every scream, every cry, was another life being sold. And somewhere above her, beyond the smoke, beyond the cages, they were calling her name. Bring out the cursed one. She froze. Her body shook. The memory of that voice cut deeper than the chains. The overseer. The one who had burned her pack alive and branded her neck with the mark of ownership. The one who'd called her a monster before throwing her to the crowd. Her chest tightened. She could still feel the iron sear into her skin. She could still hear her mother's last howl fading into the night. Lyra swallowed the scream rising in her throat and pressed her back against the wall. The shadows wrapped around her like a second skin. She could hear the wolves above, snarling, restless, caged. They could smell her fear. The moonlight slipped through a crack in the ceiling, falling across her hands. And that's when it happened. The glow. It started faint, a shimmer, like light bending in water. Then it grew brighter, spreading through her veins, pulsing like something alive. Her fingers trembled. Silver light spilled from her palms. It was beautiful and terrifying all at once. She tried to hide it, tried to bury her hands in the dirt, but the more she resisted, the stronger it grew. Her own power turning against her. The whispers began again, voices in the wind, ancient, familiar, cruel. Child of fire, child of ruin, you cannot hide what you are. She pressed her hands to her chest, shaking her head. Not now, she whispered, voice cracking. Please, not now. But the light didn't listen. It burned through her fingers, dancing up her arms like living flame. And above her, a hush fell over the market. The overseer's voice echoed, sharp and delighted. She's awake. 100 torches flared at once. The crowd cheered. The wolves howled. The chains rattled from every corner of the market. They could see her now, cornered, trembling, her glow painting the walls in ghostly light. Lyra stumbled backward, her heel catching on the edge of a broken cage. She hit the ground hard, the air knocked from her lungs. Her mind screamed run, but her body refused to move. Pain pulsed through her ribs, hot and deep. Then, footsteps. Slow, heavy, deliberate. They echoed through the corridor like judgment itself. She crawled backward, nails scraping against stone, every muscle trembling. The torchlight stretched long shadows across the floor. The air grew colder. The footsteps stopped just before her face. She looked up. A Roman guard. Tall. Broad-shouldered. Eyes burning with cruelty. He grinned. There you are, he said, reaching for the chain around her ankle. The Alpha King will pay handsomely for his lost pet. His words stabbed through her chest. Pet, that's what she was to them. A beast to be owned. A prize to be paraded. Something inside her snapped. Her hands lit up again, this time brighter, hotter, uncontrollable. The silver flame burst from her skin, flaring through the dark. The guard screamed as the light touched him, his armor melting like wax. She didn't mean to hurt him. She never meant to. But once it started, she couldn't stop it. The corridor erupted in chaos, flames licking the walls, smoke curling into the air. She staggered to her feet, heart pounding, eyes wide with horror. "No," she whispered. "Not again." Her power crackled, fading only when she forced herself to breathe. Her whole body shook from the effort. Every nerve felt raw, like she was burning from the inside out. She stumbled forward, through the smoke, through the heat. Her vision blurred. Her breath came in shallow gasps. And then, she saw it. The light of the arena. The open night sky. She stepped out into it, her body trembling, her eyes adjusting to the flood of silver moonlight. The Colossus market stretched before her, massive stone pillars, cages stacked in rows, torches burning along every archway. Wolves chained to posts snarled as she passed, their eyes following her, sensing something in her they didn't understand. Men stood around a raised platform, shouting prices, waving coins. Above them, carved into marble, the symbols of the Alpha Council gleamed like judgment itself. And there, in the center of it all, an empty platform waiting for her. She was next. Lyra's chest heaved. Her pulse thundered in her ears. The crowd didn't see her as human. They saw her as entertainment. A monster in a woman's body. The overseer spotted her, his grin sharp as a blade. "Bring her forward." Guards lunged from every corner. She turned to run, but there was nowhere left to go. Behind her, the tunnels burned. Ahead, the torches closed in. Her knees buckled. Her hands glowed faintly again, a last flicker of power she couldn't control. The overseer reached her first, seizing her by the hair, dragging her to the light. "Look at her," he shouted. "The cursed bride of the Moonblood Line. The one whose fire burned her own kin." The crowd jeered. Spat. Threw stones. Lyra's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. She bit her lip until she tasted blood. Her heart screamed to fight, but the memory of the last time she lost control silenced her. She lowered her gaze, trembling. The overseer lifted her chin with the tip of his blade. "Do you still think yourself a queen?" he mocked. She met his eyes. "No," she whispered. "Queens don't run." And with that, she kicked his leg out from under him and bolted. The crowd roared. Guards chased her. Chains rattled, wolves howled, and the night itself seemed to come alive. Lyra raced across the arena floor, dodging torches, slipping on blood and dust. Her breath tore through her chest. The air vibrated with rage and fear and the heavy weight of destiny pressing down on her shoulders. The overseer's voice followed her like a curse. "Catch her alive. The Alpha King wants her breathing." She didn't know why those words made her stumble, but they did. The Alpha King asterisk. The one name she'd tried to forget. The one man who'd looked at her once, not with fear, but with something deeper. Something she could never name. The horn sounded again. This time closer. Louder. And above the roar of the crowd, above the crackle of fire and the rush of wind, came the sound of wolves, howling in unison, hungry, bound by command. Her breath caught. Her body froze. They weren't just wolves. They were his wolves. The ground trembled beneath her feet. The chains that bound them snapped one by one. Shadows moved between the pillars, fast, silent, deadly. The air thickened with scent, earth, fur, blood, power. She turned, and saw them emerging from the darkness. Silver eyes. Black fur glinting under moonlight. And behind them, walking through the chaos like a god carved from storm and shadow, him. The Alpha King. He didn't look at her the way the others did. Not with greed. Not with disgust. His eyes held something she hadn't seen in 8 years, recognition. Her heart stuttered. The world slowed. Every sound, every scream, every flicker of fire faded until there was only him, his steady breath, his piercing stare, his voice breaking the silence like thunder. Enough. The crowd fell quiet. The wolves froze mid-step. Even the torches seemed to flicker lower. He stepped closer, the air bending around him like gravity itself bowed to his will. His voice was low, steady, dangerous. Untie her. The overseer stammered, "My lord, she's cursed." I said, the alpha's tone dropped to a growl, "Untie her." No one moved. So he did it himself. He reached down, his hand brushing against the iron at her ankle. For a heartbeat, the world stilled. Then, snap. The chain broke clean in two, as if it were made of glass. Her breath caught. She didn't move. Couldn't. His hand hovered near her wrist. "You shouldn't have run," he said softly. "You never had to." Her voice came out trembling. "I don't belong to you." "I know," he replied. "That's why I came." Her pulse thundered. The market seemed to disappear around them. For the first time in years, she wasn't running. For the first time, someone stood between her and the world. But the fear didn't fade. If anything, it grew stronger. Because deep down, she knew one thing, the Alpha King might have saved her life. But he was the one who ruined it first. If her story burns in your chest already, subscribe to Sophie's Romance Collections because here, every heart finds its fire. Thunder cracked through the night like the sky itself was splitting open. The crowd that only moments ago was chanting, jeering, hungry for blood, fell silent. Every breath stilled. Every torch flickered low. Something had shifted in the air. Something that carried power. From the darkness beyond the auction stands, a figure emerged, slow, deliberate, like the storm had taken human form. Cloaked in black wolf fur, broad-shouldered, tall enough to cast his own shadow across the firelight, he walked with the quiet certainty of someone who didn't need to demand attention, because the world bent for him naturally. The air around him was heavy. Alive. Each step sounded like thunder rolling through stone. And when he raised his head, the torches reflected in his eyes, cold silver, sharp as lightning. Eyes that once belonged to mercy, now buried under years of war. Whispers spread like wildfire through the slaves and soldiers alike. "It's him, the Alpha King, the one who broke the eastern clans, the one who commands storms." Even the overseer paled. He straightened his armor, swallowing hard before forcing a grin. "My lord," he said, voice cracking slightly, "what an unexpected honor. We weren't told you'd." "Untie her." The words weren't shouted. They didn't need to be. They rolled out quiet, dangerous, and final. A command, not a request. The guards froze. One dropped the chain he was holding. Another stepped back, muttering a prayer. "My lord," the overseer stammered, forcing a laugh that didn't reach his eyes, "you don't understand. That girl, she's marked. The cursed one. She's—" The Alpha King's gaze turned on him. And in that instant, the man forgot how to breathe. He didn't need to raise his voice. The silence did the work for him. When he finally spoke, his tone was deep, low, guttural, the voice of something older than the empire that tried to tame it. "She's mine." The words landed like thunder. Gasps rippled through the stands. The slaves looked up, stunned. Even the wolves chained along the walls bowed their heads instinctively, their instincts recognizing their king's authority. Lyra stood frozen. Every muscle in her body trembled, not from fear, but from something far more dangerous. Recognition. 8 years had passed since she'd last seen him. 8 years since that night, the night her pack burned, the night the man standing before her had chosen his duty over her life. His name still haunted her dreams, whispered by the ashes that clung to her memories. And now, here he was. The Alpha King. Kale. Her heart pounded hard enough to hurt. Her skin tingled where his gaze touched her. Her instinct screamed to run, to hide, to vanish into shadow. But something deeper, buried and unwelcome, whispered stay. He took another step closer. The torchlight revealed the scars across his jaw, the faint streaks of silver in his dark hair, the weight in his eyes that no crown could disguise. This wasn't the same man she remembered. This was someone carved by guilt, hardened by loss. Untie her, he said again, softer now, but no less commanding. The guards exchanged uncertain glances. One took a hesitant step forward, but the overseer snapped, "No. My lord, she's not yours to claim. She's the Empire's property." Cale's jaw tightened. "Then I'll take it up with the Empire." The overseer's smile faltered. "You can't just." "I can." The way he said it, simple, absolute, ended the argument. The air itself seemed to bow to his will. When he moved, it was fluid, precise. He reached for the chain around Lyra's wrists. She flinched back, but he didn't stop. His fingers brushed her skin for the first time in 8 years, and something inside both of them cracked. The iron links snapped like twigs under his grip. The sound echoed through the arena, sharp and final. Lyra stumbled, unbalanced by the sudden release. Her knees threatened to give out, but his hand caught her before she fell. Warm. Steady. Too familiar. She jerked back instantly, her voice breaking. "Don't touch me." He didn't flinch. Didn't defend himself. He just watched her, eyes full of something she didn't want to see, something dangerously close to regret. "You shouldn't have run," he said quietly. Her laugh came out sharp, bitter. "Run? You burned my home to the ground." He exhaled, slow and heavy, as though he'd been waiting years to hear those words spoken aloud. "I didn't choose that war, Lyra." "No," she shot back, her voice trembling with fury. "You just let it." The silence that followed was unbearable. Around them, the crowd stayed frozen, afraid to move or speak, trapped between awe and confusion. Cale turned slightly, his gaze sweeping the onlookers like a blade. "Go," he said. The word wasn't loud, but it carried like wind through the mountains. The crowd scattered instantly, the overseer and his guards stumbling backward, eager to escape the storm they had unknowingly provoked. Within seconds, the market that once echoed with shouts was empty, the torches flickering in the sudden quiet. Only 2 remained. The Alpha King. And the woman he had once condemned to die. The wind howled through the open arena, carrying with it the faint scent of rain. The storm that had been threatening all night was finally here. Lightning flashed in the distance, reflecting off the chain still hanging from her wrists. Cale took a step closer. She backed away. "Stay away from me. I'm not your enemy." "Then what are you doing here?" He hesitated, his eyes softening just enough for her to see the man he used to be. "I came because they were going to sell you. And I couldn't watch that happen." Her chest tightened. "You've watched worse." His jaw clenched, but he didn't deny it. Instead, he said quietly, "And I've lived with it every day since." She didn't know what to say to that. She didn't want to believe him. She didn't want the sound of his voice to still make her heart ache the way it did. Cale moved closer again, slow enough to give her time to step away, but she didn't. Something about his presence, his scent, the faint trace of rain and smoke, pulled at her. It was wrong. Unfair. Too familiar. "You've changed," he said finally, his gaze tracing the faint glow still flickering beneath her skin. "The fire doesn't scare you anymore." She met his eyes, her voice quiet but sharp. "It never scared me. People did." For a long moment, neither spoke. The only sound was the steady rhythm of rain beginning to fall, drops hissing against the dying torches. Cale lifted his hand, hesitating before reaching toward her. His thumb brushed the mark at her neck, the one the Romans branded her with, the one that had burned every time she tried to shift. His touch lingered, soft, almost reverent. "They did this to you?" Her throat tightened. They wanted to make sure I'd never forget what I am. And what's that? Her eyes met his. A mistake. The words landed like a blade. His breath hitched. No, his voice was barely a whisper, but it carried conviction. You were never a mistake, Lyra. She stepped back, shaking her head, her voice trembling. Don't say my name like that. Like what? Like it still means something to you. His expression broke, just for a moment. The mask of control slipped, revealing the truth beneath, years of guilt, buried feelings, and something raw enough to hurt just looking at it. Because it does, he said softly. It always did. The rain came harder now, soaking through her torn dress, running in rivulets down her skin. The air between them shimmered with tension, something alive, dangerous, magnetic. Every breath felt stolen. Lyra turned away, her voice small. You should leave. You've done what you came for. I can't. She laughed bitterly. Of course you can. You're the Alpha King. You can do anything. Except forget, he said. That stopped her. She turned back slowly. His eyes were steady on hers, full of something that felt too much like truth. I can't forget the night you looked at me and didn't beg, he said quietly. You were surrounded by flames, and you didn't plead for your life. You looked at me like I was the one who should be ashamed. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. You've haunted me ever since. The storm raged above them, thunder rolling across the sky, lightning illuminating the scars on his face, the marks of battles fought, kingdoms conquered, but none of it had hardened the pain in his voice now. Lyra's chest ached. Every instinct told her to hate him. Every scar on her body remembered what his soldiers had done. But standing here, with the rain washing over them, she saw something she didn't expect, regret so real it almost felt human. Still, she whispered, you can't fix the past. He nodded slowly. No. But I can stop them from hurting you again. Why? He hesitated, his throat tightening. Because I should have protected you then. And I didn't. The words hung between them, heavy, breaking something open that had been locked away for years. She looked at him for a long moment, the rain softening, the silence stretching. There was so much she wanted to say, so many things she couldn't. Finally, she whispered, I don't trust you. His answer came without hesitation. You don't have to. Just stay alive long enough to decide if you want to. She stared at him, this man who had once been her nightmare, now offering her freedom. Every instinct screamed this was a trick. But the way he said it, the way his voice broke slightly on the last word, made her wonder if he was as lost as she was. The torches flickered out one by one. The storm faded into mist. He stepped aside, motioning toward the dark passage beyond the arena gates. Come with me. Before they send more guards. She hesitated, then took a single step forward. Not out of trust. Not out of forgiveness. But because for the first time in 8 years, she wasn't running alone. And though she didn't want to admit it, not to him, not to herself, part of her heart still remembered the way his name used to sound when it wasn't followed by pain. Kale. The Alpha King. The man who broke her world, and the only one who might still be able to save it. The night folds around them like a cloak of secrets. The river murmurs against smooth stones, carrying the scent of iron, smoke, and something almost holy, the remnants of old bloodlines that refuse to die. Lyra's breath trembles as she leans against a shattered pillar, her body shaking from more than exhaustion. Every heartbeat echoes like a drum inside her skull, reminding her that she's alive only because the man beside her chose defiance over duty. The Alpha King moves quietly. His presence feels like gravity, heavy, unyielding, impossible to ignore. The air changes when he nears, thick with something unnamed. He doesn't speak as he wraps a torn piece of his cloak around her arm, his touch careful, almost reverent. Yet even that tenderness stings. She remembers chains, fire, and the smell of burning fur. She remembers men cheering as wolves fell. He was there. Her mind reels back 8 years, to the night everything turned red. The council stood in their ceremonial armor, their torches painting halos of gold and death around their heads. She had been only 16, trembling but unbroken, her eyes blazing with the gift she never asked for. Flames had danced along her fingertips, wild and uncontrolled, born from fear more than power. The high priest declared her cursed, a creature of the old gods who would bring ruin to all wolf kind. And then he stepped forward, the young general with silver eyes, chosen by the Empire to lead their rebellion against her kind. She had seen mercy flicker in his gaze for one heartbeat before he lifted his sword. He never brought it down. The punishment for disobedience was exile. But he survived, and his name became legend. The Alpha King, the man who united broken packs under Roman rule. Lyra's voice is barely a whisper. You should have killed me that night. He doesn't look at her. The moon glints off his jaw, sharp and strong, the mark of a man who spent years burying his sins. I tried to forget you, he says quietly. But the fire wouldn't let me. A bitter laugh escapes her lips, cracked and raw. The fire never lets anyone go. The river's current hums beneath their silence. In its reflection, the stars shimmer like scattered embers. She watches the water and wonders how many ghosts it's carried away. Her fingers twitch, and a faint shimmer of light dances across her palm. The power is still there, sleeping, waiting, wanting. It responds to emotion, not command. That's what makes it dangerous. She remembers the first time it awakened. The night her father was killed. The soldiers came in waves, silver-tipped spears piercing fur and flesh. She screamed for help, for the moon, for mercy, and the world answered in fire. When she woke, the valley was ash, her mother gone, her pack erased. The gift that could have saved them had destroyed everything instead. Her voice cracks when she speaks again. They branded me monster. But they were right. I can't control what I am. His hand stills on the bandage. For a moment, his mask breaks, the alpha, the warrior, the king, all replaced by something painfully human. They called me savior, he says, his tone dark with irony. But I killed my own to earn that title. We're both wearing names that don't belong to us. Lyra meets his gaze, and for the first time, she doesn't see the monster who led the slaughter. She sees the boy who hesitated, the man who carries the same guilt that haunts her. Still, her chest tightens with fear. Fate has a cruel way of binding enemies. Wind rushes through the ruins, sweeping dust across the stones. The sound reminds her of chains being dragged, of ghosts whispering in the dark. She pushes herself upright, pain flaring in her side, determination lighting in her eyes. If you brought me here to finish what you started, then do it. He rises too, towering over her. His voice is calm, too calm. If I wanted you dead, you wouldn't be breathing. Then why save me? The question hangs between them, sharp as a blade. His jaw tightens. Because the world I built doesn't deserve to survive without you in it. The confession hits harder than any wound. Lyra's breath falters. She wants to hate him, to throw those words back like stones, but something inside her trembles instead. For 8 years she's been hunted, feared, forgotten. Now, in his voice, she hears something she's never been given, remorse. She turns away, staring at the horizon where the first hints of dawn bleed through the sky. You think saving me will cleanse your sins? She asks. No, he murmurs. But it might save my soul. The silence that follows feels like a fragile truce, thin as thread and just as likely to break. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howls, long, mournful, ancient. The sound tugs at her chest, stirring the part of her that's still wild, still bound to the moon. Lyra presses her palms to the ground. The earth hums beneath her touch, alive and listening. She can feel the pulse of her ancestors, the rhythm of every wolf who ever ran free. Tears sting her eyes. They said I was the last of my kind. He steps closer, his voice low. Then they lied. His presence radiates warmth, but beneath it, there's an ache. She can feel it in him, the same loneliness, the same hunger for redemption. It mirrors her own, and that frightens her more than any enemy could. The night deepens, wrapping them in quiet tension. Lyra studies him, tracing the faint scars across his neck, the line of his shoulders, the way his hands tighten when he looks at her. Every part of him screams control, yet his eyes betray the storm underneath. She doesn't know what terrifies her more. That she might still hate him, or that she might not. The river glows faintly now, reflecting the moon's descent. The moment feels suspended between past and future, guilt and forgiveness. She breaks the stillness first. "What do you want from me?" He doesn't answer right away. Instead, he crouches beside her, his voice soft, almost a whisper. "I want you to remember who you were before they made you afraid of it." Her heart stutters. No one has ever spoken to her like that. For years, she's been treated as a curse, a weapon, an object of fear. But in his tone, there's no fear, only recognition. "Why?" she whispers. He looks at her then, really looks, as if searching for something buried deep beneath the pain. "Because the fire in you is the only thing that can end this war." Her pulse quickens. The air feels thinner, charged with unspoken truth. "You sound like you believe in destiny." "I stopped believing in destiny the night I was forced to kill for it," he replies. "But I believe in you." Lyra's throat tightens. The words settle into the cracks of her heart, dangerous and tender all at once. She doesn't trust him. She doesn't trust herself. But for the first time in years, she feels seen. The wind shifts again, carrying the faint scent of smoke. She tilts her head, every instinct sharpening. "They'll come for me," she says. "You know they will." "I know," he answers. "And they'll have to go through me first." The promise is quiet, but it carries the weight of an oath. She wants to believe him, yet a small voice inside whispers that nothing this fragile can last. She turns toward the rising sun, its light brushing her face. The warmth feels strange, almost foreign. She's spent so long running from the dark that she's forgotten what dawn looks like. Behind her, the Alpha King watches in silence. He's seen empires fall and bloodlines vanish, but in this moment, watching her breathe, he feels something he thought he'd buried forever, hope. Lyra doesn't see him move closer, doesn't hear the whisper of his cloak as it brushes against the stone. But she feels it, the pull between them, magnetic, inevitable, dangerous. Two broken souls bound by the same wound. And as the first rays of daylight cut through the ruins, the world seems to hold its breath. The fire in her veins stirs, soft but steady. She doesn't know what comes next, but for the first time, she doesn't want to run. He looks at her with eyes that hold both past sins and the faint promise of redemption. "Rest," he says gently. "The night is over." She exhales slowly, her body relaxing against the ruins. The river hums, the dawn rises, and for one fragile heartbeat, peace feels possible. But deep inside her, beneath the calm, the fire waits. And it remembers everything. They move through the wilderness in silence, the air thick with the weight of what neither dares to say. The path is narrow, carved through the remnants of what was once the heart of their world. Trees twist toward the heavens like old gods frozen mid-prayer, their roots clawing at broken statues and forgotten graves. Every sound feels amplified, the crunch of leaves beneath their feet, the distant cry of a hawk, the whisper of the wind through cracked marble pillars that once formed the grand entrance of the Moon Temple. The Alpha King walks ahead, his cloak brushing the earth like a dark tide. His scent, wild pine, smoke, and the faint trace of iron, fills the air between them. Lyra follows, her steps slower, cautious. The closer they draw to the ruins, the stronger the pulse beneath her skin becomes. It's as if the earth itself recognizes her blood, humming in time with her heartbeat. By the time they reach the shattered archway of the temple, night has begun to fall again. The sky is streaked with violet and ember, the moon rising pale and full above the horizon. Lyra pauses at the threshold. Her hands tremble as she reaches out to touch the stone. The moment her fingers graze the surface, light floods the carvings. Lines of silver fire trace the walls, illuminating symbols that have not been seen in centuries. Wolves etched in marble seem to shift, their eyes glinting like living things. The Alpha King stiffens, his voice low. Only the marked blood can awaken the ruins. Lyra doesn't answer. Her gaze follows the light as it climbs higher, reaching toward the broken ceiling where vines hang like torn veils. The air grows warm, humming with energy that feels both familiar and terrifying. Memories that aren't hers flicker through her mind, ancient battles, moonlit coronations, 1,000 voices chanting her name in a language lost to time. And then she sees it. At the center of the temple lies an altar, carved from obsidian and streaked with veins of silver. The surface glows faintly, as though a fire burns beneath it. Lyra approaches slowly, her heart pounding. The Alpha follows, his expression unreadable. As she places her palm upon the altar, the world around her dissolves. The air vanishes. The floor gives way. For a heartbeat, she's falling through light. Then comes the vision. She stands in a sea of stars. Silver fire dances around her, shaping itself into wolves of light. A voice echoes from the void, soft and endless. Child of the moonblood, bearer of the flame. You are the bridge between beasts and men. When the Alpha bows, the curse will break. The words pierce through her like a blade. The stars burst into flame, and she sees herself standing on a battlefield, her body crowned in silver light, her eyes burning with power that could shatter mountains. She sees armies kneeling, wolves howling in unison, rivers of fire cutting across the earth. And then she sees the Alpha King beside her, his knees bent, his gaze lifted not in fear but in reverence. The vision collapses. Lyra gasps, stumbling backward. The Alpha catches her before she falls, his arm strong and steady. But when she looks up at him, her eyes are wild. "It's me," she whispers, voice trembling. "I was never cursed. I was chosen." The Alpha's jaw tightens. His hands linger on her shoulders, reluctant to let go. "Chosen to destroy us, perhaps." The words cut deeper than any wound. She pulls away, her breath quickening. "You think this power exists only to destroy?" He doesn't answer immediately. His gaze drifts to the altar, to the light that still pulses faintly in its cracks. "Every prophecy has two sides," he says finally. "One to save, one to ruin. And the ones who claim to be chosen often become both." Lyra's chest tightens. She wants to argue, to shout, but a strange ache swells inside her instead. "I didn't ask for this," she murmurs. "I just wanted to live." He studies her for a long moment, his expression softening. "None of us asked for what we became." A storm rumbles in the distance. The temple walls groan as if remembering something ancient and heavy. Shadows shift among the pillars, and for the first time, Lyra notices the carvings more closely. Each depicts a woman crowned with moonlight, surrounded by wolves and men alike. In every image, her fire burns brighter than the stars, and in every one, she stands alone. The silence stretches until it feels unbearable. Then the Alpha speaks again, voice low. "What did you see?" Lyra hesitates. Part of her wants to lie, to keep the vision buried. But something about the temple makes deceit feel dangerous. "A voice," she says slowly. "It spoke of a curse. It said when the Alpha bows, the curse will break." The Alpha's eyes narrow. "Bows?" "Yes," she says. "To me." For the first time, she sees uncertainty in him. His hand clenches at his side, the muscles in his jaw working. "Then this curse demands my submission," he mutters. "That cannot be coincidence." Lyra's pulse quickens. "You think I conjured this?" "I think destiny is a cruel game," he says. "And I think whoever wrote it delights in watching us bleed for it." She stares at him, anger and pain warring inside her. "You'd rather believe in coincidence than purpose." He meets her gaze, steady and unwavering. "I've seen too many prophecies used to justify power. I won't kneel to words carved by the dead." The air between them grows tense, electric. The temple hums louder, the light flickering as though feeding on their conflict. Lyra steps closer, her voice trembling with conviction. Maybe it's not about kneeling. Maybe it's about trust. His breath catches, almost imperceptibly. Trust is harder than surrender. They stand in silence, the world reduced to the sound of their breathing and the faint whisper of ancient energy swirling around them. Lyra can feel the pull of something immense beneath the surface, destiny, or fate, or something older still. She turns away, staring at the symbols glowing along the walls. The flame bearer, she murmurs, tracing the inscription with her fingertips. A queen destined to unite wolves and men. That's what they called her. The last one who tried to unite wolves and men started a war, he replies quietly. Then maybe this time, she says, it ends with peace. Her voice softens, but there's fire beneath it, an unshakable resolve she didn't know she still had. The Alpha watches her, a flicker of admiration crossing his face before he looks away. Outside, thunder rolls again, closer now. The air smells of rain and coming danger. He finally speaks, his tone heavy. If this prophecy is true, it means the curse was never about blood. It was about fear. The wolves feared your kind, and men feared ours. Fear became the cage that bound us all. Lyra looks back at him. And now? Now we see if you can break it, he says. The storm hits. Rain pours through the broken roof, drenching the temple in silver light. Lyra closes her eyes and tilts her face upward, feeling the cold water mix with the heat of her skin. Her palms glow faintly, silver threads dancing across her fingers. The rain doesn't extinguish her fire, it feeds it. He watches, transfixed. Lightning flashes behind her, turning her into something unearthly, radiant, terrifyingly beautiful. For a moment, he forgets to breathe. She is everything the old world tried to destroy and everything the new one needs to survive. But as her power rises, so does the danger. The light begins to twist, flickering between warmth and fury. The storm mirrors her chaos, thunder clashing with the beat of her heart. The Alpha steps forward, his voice sharp. Lyra, stop. She opens her eyes, and they're no longer brown, they're molten silver. I can't. The temple walls tremble. Statues crack, the altar glows brighter. Energy surges from her body, sweeping through the ruins like a wave. He moves toward her, pushing through the wind, grabbing her shoulders. Look at me, he demands. Breathe. She tries, but her body shakes violently. It's too much. Then let me help you, he says. Their foreheads touch. His power, raw and ancient, meets hers. For a heartbeat, the chaos stills. The storm eases. The fire in her veins begins to quiet. The connection burns through both of them, painful, intimate, consuming. When the light fades, they're both on their knees, panting. Lyra's palms are scorched, her veins glowing faintly beneath her skin. The Alpha's eyes flicker between silver and storm gray. Neither speaks for a long time. Finally, she whispers, "You said you didn't believe in destiny." He gives a faint, tired smile. Maybe I still don't. But I believe in what I just felt. Rain continues to fall, washing the blood and dust from their faces. The temple's light dims, but a soft glow remains, pulsing from the altar like a heartbeat. Lyra looks at it and then back at him. The prophecy said when the Alpha bows, the curse will break. He meets her gaze steadily. And what if I refuse to bow? She holds his stare. Then maybe the curse never needed you to. For a moment, something unspoken passes between them, recognition, defiance, longing. Two forces drawn together not by prophecy, but by something deeper. He stands first, offering her his hand. She hesitates, then takes it. His grip is firm, grounding. The storm outside begins to fade, replaced by the sound of wolves howling in the distance. As they leave the temple, the ground shudders beneath them. The carvings flicker one last time before going dark. The prophecy has been awakened, and somewhere far beyond the ruins, others have felt it too. Lyra doesn't look back. She doesn't need to. The fire inside her is no longer just power, it's a promise. The Alpha walks beside her, silent, but his thoughts are loud. He has seen countless wars, countless rulers rise and fall, but none of them carried light like hers. And he knows, whatever destiny awaits, it will not be written without her. The moon climbs higher, pale and endless. Beneath its glow, two figures move through the ruins, bound by fire, shadow, and something neither can yet name. And in the silence that follows, the wind whispers through the trees, carrying the same words that once echoed in the temple. When the Alpha bows, the curse will break. But not even the moon knows whether that will mean salvation, or the end of them all. Thunder rolled like judgment from the heavens as the capital came into view again. The air trembled with dread. Every stone of the towering citadel seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the chaos that would follow her return. Lyra walked behind the Alpha King, her cloak torn and damp from rain, the scent of blood still clinging to her skin. The people stared as they passed, merchants, soldiers, slaves, all frozen between awe and terror. Whispers crawled through the crowd like smoke. The cursed bride had returned. Inside the great hall, the council of Alphas gathered in a half-circle of marble and firelight. Their eyes gleamed like predators scenting fear. The Alpha King stood tall at the center, his shoulders squared, his jaw set like iron. Lyra stood beside him, unarmed, unchained, yet surrounded by the tension of 100 sharpened blades. The oldest councilman stepped forward. His silver armor caught the light, and his voice rang cold across the chamber. "You bring a monster into our midst. Do you not remember what she is?" The Alpha King didn't flinch. "I remember exactly what she is. And I remember what we did to her people." The silence that followed was heavier than stone. Lyra could feel the pulse of her heart in her throat. She could feel the heat beneath her palms, the dangerous flicker of her fire awakening again. Every word spoken about her carved deeper into her chest. Another voice rose from the shadows. "You would defy the council for her?" He turned, his gaze cutting through the air. "I defy no one. I defend what is right." But they did not see it that way. They saw treason, lust, weakness. They saw a king blinded by a woman's eyes. Murmurs turned into growls, growls into threats. Someone shouted for her to be restrained. And that was when the first strike came. A rebel wolf lunged from the crowd, breaking through the guards, his claws glinting with silver dust. Lyra didn't have time to think, only to react. Her hand rose, and the fire burst free. It exploded through the hall, licking the walls, casting wild shadows. The scent of burning metal filled the air. The crowd screamed. The wolves howled. For a moment, all she could hear was the sound of her own heart and his voice, low, steady, commanding. "Lyra, stop." But the power had a mind of its own now. It crawled through her veins, hot and relentless, whispering of vengeance. Every face she saw blurred into the ones who had hunted her, branded her, killed her family. She felt like she was drowning inside her own flames. The Alpha King stepped through the fire without hesitation. The heat burned his cloak, singed his hair, but he didn't stop. He reached her and caught her wrist, his voice breaking through the roar of the inferno. "You are not a weapon." Her eyes met his, filled with anguish. "Then what am I?" He pulled her close, pressing his hand against the back of her neck. "Alive. That's enough." The flames shuddered, hesitated, then began to die. Smoke curled toward the ceiling as silence fell over the hall. Around them, the council stared, some in fear, some in awe, some with hatred burning behind their eyes. The eldest councilman rose again, his tone sharp with venom. "You've proven our point. She cannot be controlled. You've doomed us all." The Alpha King's jaw tightened. "She saved your lives." By almost ending them, came the reply. Lyra turned away, the weight of every gaze crushing her. The heat faded from her body, replaced by cold regret. She wanted to run, to vanish into the dark corners of the world again where no one would look at her like this. But when she looked back at him, she saw something that broke her even more: fear. Not of her, but for her. He knew what the council would do next. Within hours, the city erupted. Word spread faster than fire. The Cursed One had returned, and the Alpha King had defied the laws to protect her. The markets filled with shouts. Wolves in armor marched through the streets. Slaves whispered prayers to gods who never answered. Lyra stood at the window of his chamber, watching torches swarm below. The night was alive with anger. "They'll never forgive this," she murmured. "They don't have to," he said behind her. His voice was steady, but his scent carried tension, fear, resolve, love unspoken. She turned to face him. "They'll come for you too. I've faced death before. Not like this." His eyes softened, stormlight fading into something gentler. "You think I protect you out of duty?" Her breath caught. "Don't. Out there, they see a curse. I see the reason I still breathe." She wanted to believe him. But she'd learned long ago that love in this world came with a price, and she refused to let him pay it. When dawn broke, the first riot began. The council ordered her capture. The Alpha King's own guard hesitated at his command. The streets turned red as rebels clashed with soldiers. Caged wolves were unleashed by those who believed in her power. The Romans answered with silver nets and burning arrows. Lyra ran through the chaos, her cloak trailing ash. Every scream felt like a memory she couldn't escape. The city she once called home had become a graveyard of her past. She reached the temple gates just as the first wave of soldiers closed in. "Lyra!" His voice cut through the roar. She turned. He stood at the end of the bridge, surrounded by his own men, his sword drawn, defying his counsel, his oath, his crown. She wanted to run to him. To believe that love could survive this madness. But then she saw it, the archer on the roof, the glint of silver aimed at his heart. Time slowed. The world shrank to the space between them. Her heart screamed louder than her voice ever could. She threw out her hand, fire bursting from her palm, engulfing the arrow midair. It shattered in sparks before it could reach him. The force of it knocked her back, pain tearing through her chest. He caught her before she hit the ground. "Why would you do that?" "Because you're the only one who ever looked at me and didn't see a curse." His hand trembled against her cheek. "You'll burn yourself trying to save me." "Then let me burn." The battle raged around them. The city that once called him king now screamed for his blood. He could have stayed and fought. But instead, he lifted her into his arms and vanished into the maze of smoke and ruins. They ran until the sounds of war were only echoes behind them. The night swallowed them whole, the scent of rain and ash thick in the air. When they finally stopped, she turned to him, eyes hollow, voice breaking. "I can't keep running. Not from them. Not from what I am." He brushed the soot from her face, his voice low and rough. "Then don't. But you're not facing this alone." She shook her head, tears mixing with the dirt on her skin. "You don't understand. Every time I use this power, I lose a part of myself. One day there will be nothing left." He stepped closer, so close she could feel the heat of him, smell the wild earth on his skin. "Then I'll find you in whatever remains." The world around them burned, but in that breath of silence, something unspoken bound them tighter than any chain. The fire inside her flickered, softer now, gentler. Not destruction, just light. Yet even as dawn rose, the truth settled heavy between them. Love could not erase what she was. It could not change the prophecy. And soon, the world would demand the price for defying its laws. As they disappeared into the horizon, the capital behind them turned to smoke and ruin. The moon hung low, watching like a silent witness. Lyra didn't look back. She knew what waited there: betrayal, blood, and a love that might yet save or destroy them both. The forest was still, blanketed in the hush that follows devastation. Smoke clung to the air, ghosting through the broken trees like memories refusing to die. The moon hung heavy above the canopy, its pale glow spilling over the ruins of their escape, painting silver against the dark. Somewhere in the distance, the capital burned, but here, in the wild, the world seemed to hold its breath. Lyra moved through the underbrush, each step a struggle. Blood streaked down her arm, dark against her skin. The fire within her, once wild and relentless, had grown faint, flickering like the last ember of a dying flame. Her breath came shallow, uneven. Every muscle ached from running, from fighting, from feeling. But worse than the pain was the silence. She had left him behind. Or maybe he had let her go. The thought cut deeper than any blade. She pressed her hand to her ribs and stumbled forward until the forest opened into a small clearing. There, beneath a fallen tree, she sank to her knees. The cold soil met her palms. The night wind whispered through the leaves, brushing strands of her hair against her face. She looked up at the stars, each one distant, untouchable, and wondered if fate had always planned this loneliness for her. If all the power in her blood had only ever been a curse that kept her from belonging anywhere. But then the scent came. It moved through the air like a promise, earth, smoke, rain, and something wild beneath it all. Familiar. Steady. Her heart stuttered. She turned, but she didn't need to see him to know. He was near. He stepped from the shadows as if the night itself had released him. His cloak was torn, his hands stained with ash, his eyes bright beneath the gloom. The Alpha King, no crown, no armor, just a man chasing what he could not let go. For a long time, neither spoke. The wind filled the silence between them. He walked forward slowly, his gaze never leaving her. "You shouldn't have come," she said, voice barely a whisper. He stopped a few feet away, studying her. "You knew I would." She looked down at her hands, trembling in her lap. "You'll lose everything." "I already have." He moved closer and knelt beside her, his presence wrapping around her like warmth after a storm. Gently, he took his cloak and draped it over her shoulders. The fabric smelled of rain and wolf fur and home. She wanted to pull away, to remind herself that she didn't need him, but her body betrayed her. She leaned in, exhaustion winning over pride. His fingers brushed a strand of hair from her face. "You're hurt." "It's nothing." "Let me see." She hesitated, then lifted her arm. The wound had reopened, blood glistened where fire and flesh had met. He tore a strip from his cloak and wrapped it carefully, his hands sure, his movements slow. She watched him, the way his brows furrowed in concentration, the way his jaw clenched every time she winced. He tied the bandage tight, then sat back. "I was wrong to fear you," he said quietly. Her gaze lifted. "You feared me?" He nodded, eyes dark with something she couldn't name. "Not what you could do. What you could mean." Her voice trembled. "And what is that?" "Myself." The words hung between them, soft but heavy, like the weight of a truth finally spoken aloud. Lyra drew in a slow breath, her chest tightening. "You talk like I hold the power to destroy you." He gave a faint smile, sad, knowing. "Maybe you do." The fire crackled in the distance. Somewhere an owl cried, a lonely sound against the quiet night. The world felt small, just them, their ghosts, and the unspoken history that bound them tighter than blood. She turned away, staring at the river glinting under moonlight. 8 years, she murmured. 8 years you watched me hide. 8 years I begged the stars to forget your face. And now you say this?" His breath hitched, but he didn't look away. "Because if I'd chosen you then, you would have burned." She turned sharply, her voice breaking. "And if I had burned? I would have followed." The truth cracked something inside her. Her throat ached with everything she wanted to say but couldn't. Her power was dangerous, yes, but what frightened her more was what he made her feel. Because when she looked at him, she didn't see fire or death or destiny. She saw peace. She saw the home she'd lost. He reached for her hand, tentative, as if she might disappear if he touched her. Their fingers met, slow and trembling. His skin was rough, calloused from battles, yet his touch was gentle, reverent. "Lyra," he said softly, "I've carried your memory like a wound that never healed. Every night I told myself you were dead so I wouldn't have to imagine you in chains. And now that you're here, I don't know how to let you go again." Tears filled her eyes before she could stop them. "You don't understand. If we stay together, they'll hunt us both. You'll lose your crown." He laughed, a quiet, broken sound. "You think I care about a crown? I'd trade every throne, every army, just to stop seeing your face in my nightmares." She looked at him then, truly looked. The shadows beneath his eyes, the scars along his neck, the weight he carried for a kingdom that hated what it didn't understand. For the first time, she realized he wasn't just a king. He was a man bleeding in silence. She touched his cheek, her thumb tracing the line of an old scar. "You were there when my world ended," she whispered. "You could have stopped it." "I tried." "You obeyed their order." He swallowed hard. "And I've paid for it every day since." The honesty in his voice broke through the wall she'd built around her heart. She wanted to hate him. She wanted to scream. But the longer she looked at him, the harder it became to hold on to the rage that had kept her alive for so long. He caught her hand before she could pull away. "Trust me or leave," he said, the words trembling between plea and command. Her pulse quickened. "Trust is not something you ask for," she said softly. "It's something you earn." "Then let me earn it." The silence stretched again. The forest around them breathed. The stars shifted in the sky, as if listening. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely more than air. "I don't know how to stop running." He moved closer, his hand finding the back of her neck, steady and warm. "Then don't run. Rest." Her eyes fluttered shut, the sound of his heartbeat steady against the quiet. It felt dangerous, this stillness, this closeness, but she couldn't pull away. For one fragile moment, she let herself lean into it. His thumb brushed her jaw, and she opened her eyes. The distance between them vanished. She could feel the warmth of his breath, the heat of his body so close to hers. Her heart raced, her fire stirring again, but this time it didn't feel like destruction. It felt alive. She whispered, "You should go." "I can't. If they find us." "They won't," he said firmly. "Not tonight." The look in his eyes silenced her. There was no command in his voice now, only truth. He wasn't her captor, her savior, or her king. He was just the man who had once been her enemy and now was the only person left who saw her as more than a weapon. She turned her face slightly, close enough for her lips to brush the air between them. But then she stopped. The past hung between them like a ghost refusing to be forgotten. "You had 8 years, she whispered, voice trembling. 8 years to find me." "I did find you," he said softly. "Every night in the dark. Every time I closed my eyes." Her throat tightened. "You never came. Because I didn't deserve to." Tears blurred her vision. "And what makes you think you do now?" He hesitated. Then, quietly, "Because you're still breathing. And that means I still have a chance to make it right." The words undid her. She turned away, hiding her face, but he reached for her again, his touch light, patient. "You don't have to forgive me tonight. Just don't hate me anymore." She didn't answer. The fire crackled softly. The forest whispered with the movement of unseen creatures. Above them, the stars burned cold and endless. After a long silence, she said, "I don't know if I can trust you." He nodded slowly. "Then let me try until you can." The night stretched on, wrapping them in quiet understanding. No vows, no promises, just two souls caught between what was and what could be. The distance between them no longer felt like a wall, but a bridge waiting to be crossed. As the first light of dawn broke through the trees, she glanced at him one last time before looking away. "If I stay," she said softly, "it's not because I trust you." He smiled faintly. "Then why?" Her eyes lingered on the horizon, where light and shadow met. "Because I'm tired of being alone." He said nothing more. He simply reached out, took her hand, and held it, not to claim, not to command, but to remind her that even in a world built on fire and betrayal, there was still something worth holding on to. And for the first time in years, Lyra didn't pull away. The morning came cold and merciless. The forest that had felt like refuge only hours before now seemed to hold its breath, waiting for something to shatter. The light of dawn crept through the trees, pale and trembling, like it feared what it would reveal. Lyra stood near the riverbank, washing the blood from her hands. Her reflection rippled in the water, eyes hollow, face drawn, a faint glow beneath her skin that pulsed with quiet danger. She had slept little. The dreams had been too heavy, too real. Fire, screams, a crown of ash. Behind her, the Alpha King moved through the clearing, his every step cautious. The scent of morning mist clung to him, mixed with smoke and iron. He watched her, the woman who had once been a myth and now stood before him, fragile yet fierce. He wanted to speak, to tell her the things he hadn't dared in the night, but something inside warned him. Words would not save them now. Lyra turned when she sensed him near. For a moment, her eyes softened, and there was something almost human in her smile, small, uncertain, like a flame flickering in the wind. But before he could answer it, the sound came. Wolves. Not wild ones. Marching ones. The forest erupted with the rhythm of boots and claws. The air changed, sharp with the metallic scent of silver and betrayal. Lyra's hand went instinctively to her side. "They found us," she whispered. He drew his blade. "Stay behind me." But even as he spoke, he knew it was too late. The woods parted, and the Alpha Council emerged in a half-circle of armor and fury. Cloaked in the symbols of their packs, their eyes glowed gold in the dim light. The one who led them stepped forward, Lord Cashin, his most trusted ally, his brother in war. The Alpha King's jaw clenched. "You shouldn't be here." Cashin smiled thinly. "Neither should she." The others spread out, surrounding them. Spears glinted, runes burning faintly along their shafts. Lyra's pulse quickened. The mark on her wrist shimmered faintly beneath her skin, as if it recognized the threat before she did. "What is this?" she demanded. "You serve your king, not the council." Cashin's gaze fixed on her with something between hatred and fear. "We serve the realm. And you, creature, are no queen. You're the weapon that killed the first Alpha King." The words hit like a blow. Lyra froze, unable to breathe. She looked at the Alpha King, searching his face for denial, for defense, for anything that said he didn't believe it. But his expression had gone still, too still. "That's a lie," she said, her voice shaking. "You think I wanted this curse? You think I chose it?" Cashin sneered. "We think your kind was born from it." He turned to the Alpha King. "She carries the blood of the moonfire. You know what that means. She was made to destroy us, not save us." The Alpha King's grip tightened on his sword. His mind raced. Every instinct screamed to protect her, but the weight of the accusation, the truth buried in the prophecy, it pressed on him like a chain. "Say you are innocent," he whispered. Lyra turned toward him, the hurt already spreading through her like frost. "Would you believe me if I did?" His silence answered her before his lips could. The wind picked up, scattering ash and leaves across the clearing. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled, a long, mournful sound that seemed to tear through the air. Lyra's chest rose and fell, her breaths quick and shallow. The men around them raised their weapons. She could feel their judgment pressing on her skin like heat. "I bled for your people," she said, her voice trembling but loud. "I hid for 8 years so your council could sleep soundly at night. And still, you call me monster." The Alpha King's eyes flickered with pain. He stepped forward, reaching for her. "Lyra." "Don't," she said sharply. "Not now." Her power stirred, answering the storm building inside her. The ground beneath her feet began to hum, soft at first, then stronger. The air vibrated, charged with something ancient. "Stand down," the Alpha King commanded his council. "You don't know what you're dealing with." Cashin laughed. "Neither do you." The first spear flew. It struck the earth inches from her feet. The silver runes on its shaft burned bright, reacting to her presence. Lyra staggered back, her pulse thundering. Something deep within her snapped. All the fear, the betrayal, the ache of being hunted, it broke open at once. The mark on her wrist flared like molten metal. Flames erupted from her skin, curling around her arms, her hair, her eyes. She screamed, not in pain, but in release. The Alpha King shielded his face from the blast, shouting her name, but she couldn't hear him anymore. The world had gone silent. The flames moved with thought, alive and furious. They wrapped around the trees, turning bark to ash. The earth cracked beneath her feet, splitting open in fiery veins. The wolves in the distance howled again, this time in terror. "Stop," the Alpha King shouted. "You'll kill them." But Lyra only looked at him. Her eyes glowed silver now, unearthly and cold. "Would you have believed me," she said, her voice echoing like thunder, "if I had sworn I was innocent?" He took a step toward her. "Yes." Too late. The words were final. The light burst outward, blinding, searing, unstoppable. Cashin and the council stumbled back as the fire consumed the clearing. The ground split, swallowing their formation, scattering the men like leaves in a storm. When the fire dimmed, she was gone. The Alpha King dropped to his knees, his blade slipping from his grasp. The air still burned, thick with smoke and regret. He looked at the place where she had stood, now a circle of scorched earth, her scent fading from the air. Cashin staggered to his feet, coughing. "You see," he rasped. "She is the end of us." The Alpha King's hand clenched around the dirt. "No," he whispered. "She's the end of me." The forest fell silent again, save for the crackle of dying embers. Far away, in the shadow of the mountains, silver fire flickered briefly before vanishing into the mist. Lyra reappeared on the edge of a cliff, the wind tearing at her hair. Her body trembled from the power she'd unleashed, her heart heavy with what she'd left behind. She fell to her knees, gripping the stone beneath her. The world below stretched endless, indifferent. She had wanted freedom. Instead, she found ruin. Tears streamed down her face, hot against the cold air. She whispered into the wind, "I didn't want to be this." The echo of her own voice answered her, hollow and alone. Behind her, the moon rose high, casting its pale light across her trembling form. It reflected in her eyes like broken glass. Somewhere deep inside, the fire still burned, but now it no longer felt like a gift. It felt like punishment. The Alpha King's face haunted her, his hesitation, his silence. The way he looked at her, not as his equal, but as the weapon the world claimed her to be. Her chest tightened until she could hardly breathe. The wind howled louder, carrying the faintest whisper of his voice, calling her name. She stood, the flames in her veins responding to her grief. The ground beneath her feet cracked again, and light shimmered faintly along the horizon. There, beneath the rising sun, Lyra made her choice. She would no longer run. No longer beg to be believed. No longer hide from what she was. If the world wanted a monster, then it would have one. Her eyes lifted to the heavens, and for the first time, she did not flinch from the fire inside her. The dawn caught her hair, her skin, her tears, and for a moment, she looked less like a woman and more like prophecy reborn. But deep in her chest, where love still lingered like an open wound, she whispered his name one last time, as if releasing him to the wind. And then she vanished again, into silver light, leaving nothing but ash, silence, and the faint echo of her howl splitting the morning sky. The city was dying. Smoke clung to the sky like an old scar, turning the dawn gray and lifeless. Once, the capital had been a place of howling pride, its towers carved with the symbols of every pack that had sworn loyalty to the Alpha King. Now, the same symbols hung burned and shattered, hanging limp in the wind. For weeks, the wolves had been hunted. Dragged from their homes, chained in the streets, paraded before human crowds who screamed for blood. The Romans had come with their silver nets, their priests, their songs of purification. They called it order. They called it justice. But everyone knew it for what it was. Punishment. In the center of the ruined city stood the arena, vast and silent except for the sound of chains. Beneath it, in the dark stone cells, the Alpha King sat in shadow. His wrists were bound in silver cuffs, the kind forged not to contain flesh but spirit. The metal burned cold into his skin, but he did not move. His mind replayed that last image of her, Lyra disappearing in the blaze, her scream cutting through morning air. Cassian had told the council she was gone. That she'd burned herself out. The lie had spread quickly, comforting to those who feared her return. But the Alpha King knew better. Fire like hers did not die. It waited. Above ground, the crowds gathered once more. The air reeked of sweat and fear. Soldiers dragged another wolf into the ring, a young female, trembling, her eyes wide with terror. A priest raised his blade toward the sky. Let this blood cleanse the realm. The crowd roared. And then the sky changed. The moon, pale and watchful, began to darken, swallowed by shadow. A shiver rippled through the crowd. The air turned heavy, thick with something that did not belong to this world. The torches lining the arena flickered, then died. For one heartbeat, the city held its breath. Then came the sound, low, distant, and unearthly. A howl that rose from the horizon like a storm breaking open the heavens. The soldiers froze. The priest's hand trembled. The crowd turned their eyes toward the east. A blaze of silver light tore across the sky. It moved like a living thing, swallowing the clouds, painting the ruins in molten glow. The fire struck the earth outside the arena with the force of thunder, sending a tremor through the stones. And from the heart of that light, she rose. Lyra. Her form shimmered as she walked through the flames, half woman, half wolf, every inch of her glowing with a radiance that seemed to defy death itself. Her fur was silver fire, her eyes the color of molten gold. The ground cracked beneath her feet, yet where she stepped, life seemed to follow, grass forcing its way through ash, the scent of wild earth piercing the stench of decay. The soldiers aimed their spears, but their hands shook too violently to hold them steady. One by one, they fell to their knees. Lyra's gaze swept the arena, cold and calm, the quiet of something greater than rage. The priest stammered a prayer, his voice small against the roar of the wind. Who dares speak of purity, she said, her voice echoing through the air like thunder rolling through a valley, when your hands drip with blood? The crowd fell silent. Even the chains in the cells below seemed to still, as if listening. I was never your slave, she said, stepping closer. Every syllable pulsed with light. I was never your curse. She lifted her head, and her voice rose, carrying across every street, every ruin, every trembling soul. I am your reckoning. The arena trembled. Flames poured from her hands, curling upward, wrapping around the iron gates. Silver light erupted from the ground, melting chains as if they were wax. Wolves staggered to their feet, their eyes reflecting the light of the moon that now burned bright and full again. The soldiers tried to fight, but their blades turned to ash in their hands. Lyra raised her palm toward the prison tunnels below. The earth shuddered. Stone walls cracked open, revealing the dungeons where her kind had been caged. One by one, the prisoners stepped into the light, blinking, weak, but alive. Among them, him. The Alpha King. He shielded his eyes against the glare, disbelieving. Her scent hit him first, smoke and moonlight and something heartbreakingly familiar. Then he saw her standing above the arena, radiant and terrible, her body a storm of fire and fury. She turned her gaze to him. For a long, unbroken moment, neither spoke. There was too much between them, betrayal, love, loss, faith. The silence held more weight than words ever could. The chains at his wrists split apart. The silver hissed, melting into the dirt. He rose slowly, his breath shaking. "Lyra," he said, his voice breaking. She looked at him, her expression unreadable. "You let them call me a monster." His heart clenched. "I tried to protect you." Her eyes flickered with pain. "By caging me in your fear?" The fire around her flared, but not in anger, in sorrow. "You should have trusted what we were meant to be." He stepped forward, though the heat burned against his skin. "And what are we now?" Her gaze softened, just barely. "What we've always been. The flame and the shadow. The curse and the crown. Only now, I choose who burns." She lifted her hand. The sky answered. Lightning tore through the clouds, striking the council tower in the distance. The ancient spire collapsed in an explosion of stone and fire. The crowd screamed and fled, but Lyra's eyes never left the prison cells. The wolves who had been enslaved for generations stared up at her, awe and fear mingling in their faces. "Run," she said to them, her voice low but commanding. "Run home. You are free." One by one, they obeyed, shifting into their true forms, breaking into the streets. The sound of paws against stone filled the air like rain. But not all ran. Some stayed. Some knelt. Not out of fear. Out of reverence. The Alpha King watched as the world he once ruled crumbled and rebirthed itself in the span of moments. He saw her, his salvation, his ruin, stand upon the ashes and take her place not as queen, but as something higher. And yet, beneath all that power, he saw it. The loneliness. The weight. The unspoken wish that someone might still see the woman beneath the fire. He stepped closer. The flames parted for him, hesitant, uncertain, as if even they remembered what it was to love. "You don't have to do this alone," he said quietly. Lyra's breath caught. For a heartbeat, the world seemed to still. The fire around her flickered, dimming, revealing the faint shimmer of tears in her eyes. Then she shook her head. "This is my burden. You were never meant to carry it alone." She looked at him, and the distance between them felt both infinite and fragile. "If I fall," she whispered, "the fire dies with me. Then let me fall with you." For the first time, the light around her faltered, not in weakness, but in surrender. The chains of power that had once bound her to fate cracked and dissolved into the air. The earth groaned beneath their feet. The last of the council's stronghold crumbled. Silver fire poured through the city streets, swallowing the altars where wolves had been sacrificed, cleansing them until only white ash remained. When the flames died, silence followed. The moon stood full again, no longer eclipsed. Its light bathed the arena, soft and cold, washing the ruin in silver. Lyra stood at the center, breathing hard, her body trembling from the power that had finally quieted. Around her, the freed wolves bowed their heads. She looked at them, her people, and spoke not as a god or queen, but as one of them. "No more chains," she said softly. "No more masters. The blood of our kind will never again be a sacrifice." The wolves lifted their heads, howls rising to the night sky, echoing across the city like a promise. The Alpha King stood behind her, watching as she faced the horizon, her hair glowing silver in the moonlight. He knew this moment was not victory, it was rebirth. And though the fire no longer burned wild in her eyes, it lived in her soul. Lyra closed her eyes and whispered to the night, "I am not your sacrifice." The wind carried the words across the ashes, through the city, into the wild beyond, until every creature that still remembered her name knew the truth. She was not the curse. She was the answer. And the world would never forget the night the moon bowed to her flame. The moon had lowered into a pale haze above the ruins, painting the city in ghostly light. Smoke still curled from the arena's walls, the scent of scorched metal and wet earth thick in the air. The crowd had vanished. The Empire songs had gone silent. Only the echoes of battle lingered, faint, trembling reminders of the night the world shifted. Lyra stood amidst the ashes, her breath slow, unsteady. The fire had left her bones aching, her skin cold where once it burned. The silence pressed in around her, heavy and strange. It wasn't peace. Not yet. It was the pause between heartbeats, the fragile stillness before one decides to live again. A faint sound broke the quiet, a chain dragging against stone. She turned toward the dungeon corridor, her body tense, ready. And then she saw him. The Alpha King. He was on his knees, bound by what little silver the Romans had left behind. His armor was scorched, his face streaked with dirt and blood. The sight of him cut through her like memory, every moment of love, betrayal, and unspoken forgiveness threading together in that single breath. She stepped closer, slow, uncertain. He lifted his head. His voice was a whisper, raw and trembling. "You came back." Lyra's heart stilled. For a moment, all the noise of war disappeared. There was only that, his voice, his eyes, the quiet truth in both. She knelt beside him. Her fingers brushed the silver at his wrists, and the metal hissed, melting away under her touch. "You finally saw me," she said, her tone soft but certain. "Not what they said I was. Not what you feared. Me." He bowed his head, not out of shame, but surrender. "I see you now." His breath shook as he looked up, meeting her gaze. "And if seeing you means losing everything I am, then I am willing." She watched him in silence. The firelight reflected in her eyes, dimming, softening. He reached for her hand. His fingers trembled when they found hers. "Then take me," he said, voice breaking on the words. "All of me. The man, the wolf, the mistakes, everything that's left." The wind stirred between them, carrying the scent of rain. The ashes around their feet swirled like dust in moonlight. Lyra's throat tightened. She wanted to speak, but no words came. Her body remembered the warmth of his touch, the ache of his absence, the way his voice had haunted every sleepless night. And yet, deep down, something in her still feared what surrender meant. "Cassian," she whispered, his name fragile on her tongue. "You would follow me even if it meant your death?" His eyes didn't waver. "I already did. The moment I chose not to kill you all those years ago." A tremor passed through her. The fire inside her stirred again, not in anger, but in recognition. She cupped his face in her hands, her thumbs tracing the lines of exhaustion and pain carved there. "You were never my enemy," she said. "You were my mirror." For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. The fire that once raged now glowed faintly around them, a quiet flame, not meant to destroy, but to heal. The sound of the river below reached them, soft and steady, the first sign that life was returning to the broken city. He leaned forward, pressing his forehead to hers. "Then let it end here," he murmured. "No more wars. No more crowns." Her breath caught. "And what comes after?" He smiled faintly. "Whatever you choose." Lyra closed her eyes. The weight of it all, the prophecy, the fire, the years of running, pressed against her chest. She realized she'd never been afraid of power. She'd been afraid of belonging. Because belonging meant vulnerability. And vulnerability meant loss. But now, as his warmth seeped through her cold skin, she understood that love was not weakness. It was the quiet defiance that survived everything else. The night wind brushed against them. The fire around them dimmed, fading into soft light that wrapped the ruins like dawn. Lyra stood slowly. Cassian remained kneeling, his head bowed, not as a king before a queen, but as a man before the one soul who had seen him unmasked. She looked down at him, her expression unreadable, torn between affection and sorrow. "Rise," she said gently. "The world has no need for kings anymore." He hesitated, then stood. Their hands lingered for a moment before falling away. Around them, the freed wolves gathered in the shadows, watching. Waiting. They didn't know what came next. None of them did. The empire was broken, the moonfire gone. The prophecy had ended, but destiny was still unwritten. Lyra turned to the open arena. The night stretched endlessly before her, silver mist curling over the ground like breath. She took one final look at the man beside her. If you had to choose, she said softly, between saving me and fearing me, what would you have done? He met her gaze, his answer silent but clear in his eyes. She smiled faintly, the kind of smile that hides more ache than it shows. I thought so. Her voice drifted, lower now, almost a whisper. The world will ask you the same question one day. She stepped forward, the moonlight wrapping her in silver as she disappeared into the mist. Her voice lingered in the air, haunting and gentle, carried by the wind. Would you have chosen me, or feared me too? The arena darkened. The echoes faded, leaving only her words, lingering like a heartbeat in the silence. And as the scene dissolved into darkness, her voice, calm, distant, burning, spoke once more. If this story lit something inside you, subscribe to Sophie's Romance Collections. Because here, every heart finds its fire. The night had fallen into a heavy stillness, the kind that makes every sound feel sacred, every silence heavier than breath. The air carried the scent of rain and ash, mingled with something ancient, something awakening. The ruins of the arena still glowed faintly, silver veins of moonfire threading through cracked stone, whispering of the power that had burned there. Lyra's flame had faded into the distance, her presence lingering only as warmth in the cold air. The wolves she freed had vanished into the mountains, leaving behind the ruins of an empire too stunned to comprehend its undoing. And for a brief moment, the world felt weightless, suspended between endings and beginnings. Cassian stood at the heart of the arena, surrounded by the ghosts of his choices. The scent of her still clung to him, wildfire and rain. The silence pressed against him, deeper than any battle wound. He looked down at his hands, the scars still glowing faintly with silver light, her mark seared into his skin. He exhaled slowly. You should have killed me, he murmured to the air, though he knew she wouldn't answer. The wind carried no reply, only the echo of her last words. Would you have chosen me, or feared me too? The question gnawed at him, sinking into the marrow of his thoughts. For the first time, he didn't know the answer. He turned toward the broken gate, where the moonlight fell in fractured patterns through the smoke. Each shadow seemed alive, each flicker whispering something unseen. The ruins creaked as the earth shifted beneath them, a faint tremor, like a sleeping beast turning in its slumber. He stilled. Another sound followed, a low hum, buried deep beneath the ground. It was not the sound of magic dying. It was the sound of something awakening. The air thickened. The scent of ozone filled the night. Cassian's pulse quickened. He glanced around, but the arena was empty, the stands shattered and lifeless. The tremor grew stronger, spreading outward, rippling through the dust and stones until the cracked symbols on the arena floor began to glow once more. He took a cautious step forward, his boots crunching over debris. The light intensified, drawing lines, ancient, curved, deliberate. They formed the same sigil that once appeared beneath Lyra's feet in the Moon Temple. But now, it pulsed red, not silver. A voice drifted through the shadows, soft, feminine, but cold as winter's breath. She is not the only one. Cassian froze. The words came from everywhere and nowhere, echoing through the cracks in the earth, curling around his spine. He turned slowly, his eyes scanning the darkness. Who's there? The air answered with a sigh. Dust lifted from the ground, swirling upward in ghostly spirals. Out of the haze, a figure began to form, a silhouette cloaked in smoke and moonlight. At first, he thought it was Lyra. The shape was familiar, slender frame, long hair, eyes glimmering like embers. But then the light shifted, and he saw the difference. Her eyes were darker, shadows where flame should have been. Her presence colder, older. The apparition stepped closer, her voice quiet but steady. You thought her the last. You thought her the prophecies' end. But the fire was never meant for one. Cassian's jaw tightened. What are you? She tilted her head slightly, the hint of a smile playing on her lips. The other half of what she cannot control. The words struck him like a blow. That's impossible. The flame cannot be split. Can't it? The figure moved closer, the light revealing faint patterns etched into her skin, sigils like Lyra's, but reversed, inverted, marked with darkness instead of light. Every gift births its opposite. Every savior has a shadow. Cassian took a step back, instinct urging him to shift, but something in the air held him still. "You're lying." Lyra broke the curse. The shadow smiled faintly. She broke hers. Not mine. The tremor beneath the ground deepened, rumbling through the bones of the city. The ruins shook, dust falling like soft rain. The red glow spread, tracing its way through the cracks of the arena, through the streets beyond. Somewhere far in the distance, a wolf howled, its cry long, fractured, filled with pain. Cassian's heart pounded. He looked toward the horizon, where the moon hung low and blood-tinted. "What do you want?" The figure's eyes gleamed with quiet hunger. "Balance," she said. "For every flame that heals, there must be one that consumes. She is the light. I am what the world buried to keep her pure." Her words lingered, wrapping the air in cold finality. Cassian took a step forward, defiance returning to his voice. "If you come for her, you'll go through me." The shadow's form wavered, her voice softer now, almost tender. "You already chose her. You don't get to choose again." Then she was gone. The air fell still. Only the red glow remained, fading slowly into the earth until it vanished, leaving nothing but silence. Cassian stood alone once more, his breath shallow, his chest tight. The moonlight returned to its silver hue, as though nothing had happened. Yet the mark on his skin pulsed once, faint but sharp, echoing the memory of that voice. He looked toward the mountains, where Lyra had disappeared hours ago. "Lyra," he whispered, "what have we awakened?" The wind answered with a howl that did not belong to any living wolf. It was deeper, older, like the cry of the world remembering something it swore to forget. Far beyond the walls, in the shadowed heart of the forest, Lyra stirred in her sleep. Her dreams burned with silver fire. But beneath that light, darkness flickered, a twin heartbeat, familiar and foreign all at once. The voice came to her, soft and broken. "Sister." Lyra's eyes snapped open, the reflection of the blood-red moon gleaming in her pupils. She rose slowly, her breath uneven, the air around her trembling. The forest seemed to whisper her name, not in worship, but in warning. The prophecy she thought she fulfilled was not an ending. It was a key. And somewhere, in the forgotten depths of the world, the lock was turning. Cassian stood upon the broken walls of the arena, looking out at the horizon as the first light of dawn tried to pierce the mist. But the sun struggled to rise, dimmed by the crimson shadow of the moon still hanging above. He clenched his fists, the faint pulse of the mark on his skin sinking with something in the distance, something alive. He didn't know whether it was calling to him or warning him away. The earth gave one final shudder, then fell still. For a moment, the entire empire seemed to hold its breath. Then, from the silence, a whisper emerged, barely audible, carried by the last curl of smoke from the arena's ashes. "She is not the only one." The sound faded into nothing, leaving behind a silence more dangerous than before. Cassian looked to the horizon, to the faint line where the silver mountains met the blood-stained sky. His voice was quiet, but it carried. "Then the world isn't done with us yet." And as the screen faded to black, the faint echo of Lyra's heartbeat rose once more, steady, strong, joined now by another. Two rhythms intertwined, the promise of light and shadow colliding once again. The story didn't end. It only slept, waiting for the next awakening.